Then something just snapped. Something inside of me. No, no more! That's it! I don't care! I didn't care anymore. I didn't care about being better than Kakarot. I didn't care about being a Super Saiyan. I didn't care if I lived. I didn't care about anything. And then it happened.
These concepts are being utilized on a global scale currently. And what we're going to go through today is how there were two groups of individuals that were utilizing some of Tracy's work, namely the plus ultra vernacular, to create a main group that both of these subsidiaries were supporting in a attempt to see themselves as the superiors and remove the uneducated pores below them. And I think that's kind of where we're trying to tie this together, that this isn't just a spooky, scary story. It's the details and the mechanisms behind controlling people's thoughts.
I think the basic idea of the Hegelian dialectic, everybody more or less, right or left. I know we made a criticism of both groups last time, and a fair one. But I think that people do understand the Hegelian dialectic. Yes, it's simplistic. Okay, I try to encourage people to study Kabbalah, because I think it is the best open-facing system to understand dialectical alchemy. I mean, there is no dialectical alchemy without Jewish Kabbalah, and those medieval Kabbalists were exceptionally brilliant. Mathematicians, physicists. It was basically a bunch of mini Sachkis in North Africa, little geniuses doing their Kabbalah. So why I like that metaphor is because you can map everything, every single thing. You can map everything to the tree. You can even see how it travels along the paths to different spheres, and there are different iterations it can take. So I encourage people to do that. And you're saying people have to understand where talking points diverge and where they synthesize.
Especially what you're talking about where they diverge and converge is understanding the vernacular and the words and phrases that are used, and think of your reactions to those words and phrases. And I think that's where a lot of people, they get wrapped up in the emotional response to it. They forget to stop and think what was actually said right there.
When I first began this project and going on other people's shows, my worldview was that if we controlled our responses to the dialectical games, we would also in some way restrain the game itself. Restrain it, I don't mean stop it, but it definitely, and maybe even
impede it.
That's right. And while there is clearly a magical system of dialectical thinking that a magician must have, I also think it's not as useful because it's so much easier to get lost in the illusion of the game.
Yeah. This goes on to what I was saying in the last one, is we use the Masonic chessboard analogy again because it works pretty well. When you're working your way across the board, or you make your way across the board, and now you realize that, oh, I can become one of these game masters. I can start managing the pieces myself. That's where I think the main crux of the issue is when people start to think that, oh, I can now control the board. That's where I come at this. It's easier and it's better to step back and demystify the board, explain what's going on, and not play the game. And that's where I see a lot of people are, like we were talking about before the show, is certain people start to play the game and then it kind of dilutes their initial message.
I think that's the truth. The more focused I am on doing my own thing, having my own thoughts, my own perceptions, sadhana, I feel so much stronger. I don't feel controlled. Now, is there a trade-off that I'm not as aware of the things that are going on? Yes.
Yeah, well, and also I think that it's comforting to kind of like fall back into one of those like Hegelian dialectics. It's comfortable to think that, oh, I understand how all this is done. I know how this game is played. I know, like, empirically what's going to happen in the end. It's very comforting to think that when you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. Nobody actually knows. You can make predictions. You can have lots of data sets and graphs that can map these things out for you, but you don't actually know what's going to happen until that time comes.
We should try and be in the moment. We should try and be present, but also have forethought. The word you brought up pre-recording, foresight. Those are
Mhm.
two different things, but they're very aligned. I'm just going to use this example, Zach, because I always think about it, and I've never even spoken about this ever. I'm sure you know about the owl at Bohemian Grove and
Mhm.
the cremation of care. And why am I bringing this up? Well, there is a goddess of wealth. It was her holiday yesterday, one of them. And she, in Tantra, she rides an owl. But in normative Hinduism, she rides. I forget what the other Vahana is, but it's not an owl. It's not associated with her. But in this context, in a tantric context, it is. And the reason she rides an owl is because the owl perceives straight in front of it. But yes, it can turn its head and look at the other on the board. But one of her features is that she doesn't grant you the kind of wealth that you get lost in. It's not illusory Maya. It's not delusory Maya. It's not just the reflection of beauty in the world. And she gazes straight ahead. Like the owl, she can only see what's in front of her, although she has the ability again to see what's also around her. But she chooses to be focused. So I always think of that as that's what they're doing. The ends justify the means, purging ourselves of sins. It's very like a homa. That's what they're basically doing. And I feel this is a really good metaphor for some of the things that we're talking about. This idea of you do have to be in the moment, but you also have to have those things that we said, foresight, foreknowledge, and you also have to have presence to be aware of things that may happen without engaging in fear.
This episode, I've titled it The Cappy Inquiry, or, this is what I have in my notes of the Cappy Inquiry. And this section is going to be a little bit difficult for me because I have, all my margins are filled and I'm not quite sure where these things tied in because this was months ago, but we'll move into this. So the Cappy Inquiry. Isaac Cappy, he was an actor from Thor, Terminator Salvation, Fanboys, Breaking Bad. He also was a musician. He was the band, I guess, was Charles McMansion. This was from Pool House, told me about this, with Tom Sandoval of Vanderpump Rules, Monster Paws, and Brackets and Jackets. What had happened is Cappy started talking about pedophilia in Hollywood, and there were some things that happened after this, after he started talking about it. So there was a situation where he was allegedly caught or was allegedly choking Michael Jackson's daughter, Paris. And this was supposedly in lieu of exposing the pedophilia in Hollywood. Not quite sure what was going on there, but there were police. I mean, I don't know if there's police reports. I haven't looked at that, but there were news articles on it that you could find. So he started talking about this online, and then Isaac Cappy was found / was introduced to Vegan Mikey. Not sure how the connection was made, but I think it was through Lift the Veil podcast. And Vegan Mikey had gone on this Lift the Veil podcast, and was people were saying it was a LARP. People were saying this is all kind of fictional, or the same kind of things that I was talking about in the last episode, where like I'm not quite sure what was real, what was fictional, what was being utilized in advance of the story, or what was actually factual. In this podcast, he went on to quote unquote expose Voodoo Donuts and how Voodoo Donuts was related to Dante's nightclub or something like that, which was somehow related to Trauma Films, which I think she had also tied it into Comet Pizza, but I think she was confusing things at the time because I don't know of a Comet Pizza in, was it Seattle, right? I think this is where the Voodoo Donut stuff was going on. Cappy, one of his stories that was, I guess, important to his lore was he told a story that Seth Green allegedly showed him a room where he said he kept the kids and asked if he wanted to see them. So this was a quote unquote invitation. And I have that he was QAnon. I'm not quite sure what I meant by that initially, but I think I'm saying that this was an after the fact thing of Isaac Cappy being thrust into the QAnon ideology fiction story without necessarily it being related. I mean, I wouldn't say that it's not related because obviously we'll get into stuff down here, but he was thrust into it afterwards, and soon after his death, if you reversed image searched his headshot on Google, it was showing it was suggesting sexual abuse, quote unquote. If you search his headshot, it was the little quotation thing of like what you were searching for. It says best guess for this image, sexual abuse. So this was a screenshot that was put in, I think it was one of Tracy's videos or some other person's video, I can't remember. But this is, I have quote unquote screenshot evidence, so I'm not sure if this was real, if this was, somebody went into their browser and Spec Element and was playing with some things, but that's what was shown. And then this vegan Mikey guy in that Lift the Veil podcast, I think it was in the Lift the Veil podcast, he was talking about Shanghai tunnels that were supposedly connected them, which Tracy confirms this, that there was at least a door that supposedly went to tunnels in Dante's basement, the Dante's nightclub. This is, what she says. It could be true, it could be false, not quite sure. But she didn't see the tunnels, but supposedly saw access to the tunnels. She saw some sort of doors or something in the basement, which could have been a closet for all we know. But what I've done some research back when I was initially doing this, that there were tunnels that were used in Seattle to kind of traffic goods and pretty much whatever goods would be sold, instead of having them being transported on the streets above, they would be transferred through these tunnel systems underneath the main streets. So it was just easier for traffic flow. But inevitably, these were also used for illicit activities, namely kidnapping and shipping children. I would also probably lump in here gun running and drug running. These would probably, like any of these illicit activities, would probably be utilizing these tunnels. And the term Shanghai comes up, and it comes from what, I personally think these specific tunnels that they're talking about. And these tunnels, or this term, came about in like the mid to late 1800s, like I think 1883 or something was like the first use case of it. But Vegan Mikey claimed that all of these tunnels are still in use and all this stuff is still happening. And this is what I think what got Tracy connected to Cappy, because Vegan Mikey was supposedly talking to Cappy, and Tracy started talking to Cappy on Twitter as he was talking to lots of people at the time about the above subjects, allegedly trying to network and find a place to speak. He was interviewed on Alex Jones, and Alex Jones called him out as a LARP. And Tracy said there was almost a community consensus that he was a LARP at the time, and he had an open email to the public. Okay, this is important. The email was plusultra17@gmail.com. Yes. So this is either a QAnon interest,
Mm-hmm.
or this is an interest in Tracy's writings, because as we're going to discuss now, Tracy was writing about Plus Ultra, and she also had a podcast named Plus Ultra that went all the way back to 2005. So this is an interesting tie-in to her work being utilized in the QAnon psyop, or I hate to use that term, but in the QAnon scenario.
That's a good word, scenario. I like that.
Yeah, because I'm not sure exactly what was going on, so I don't like to assign blame, but the way this thing's looking, it looks like it was a high-end military psyop that was trying to take advantage of people's animosity towards child abusers.
I think that it was priming people. I almost feel it functions it's very initiatic. And this is just my opinion. This is just my speculation. I was not even on the internet during the really heavy Q time. I wasn't really even aware of it, to be honest, until after the fact.
Yeah.
From what I have heard, so this is a third hand response, there are elements that sound perhaps accurate or realistic in some ways to the deep political layer that happens in the world that we don't see.
Well, exactly how you said it was almost. You said it was almost an initiation. I heard that correctly, right?
Yes,
Yes.
that's exactly right.
So that's I agree with that. I agree with that point, and that will tie into the next part. That I do believe you're right with that. It was an initiation for something. I'm not quite sure, but this was, like I said, this was the name of her podcast, Plus Ultra, and it was being used on, this name was being used on 4chan and similar board sites where they're talking about Plus Ultra being a secret society connected to Trump. So this secret society that they were building.
I just want to say two things about Plus Ultra really quickly. So there's an interesting theory. You'll appreciate this. It's an alchemical axiom about the production of the color green, and that would come in a 0 point. So if you want to think of what Plus Ultra is, it's a plus and a minus. It cancels out. It comes a 0 point. So that would be green. We know the sun is tinged with green or appears green, or in chromatography it is on the peridot spectrum. It's an ugly spring green color. That is what, as I mentioned in the last episode, Tipperith is where you're at when you're synthesizing into gold. Now we know in some ways a Masonic apotheosis, and this is not just Masonic, this is magical in if you're only going to a certain place, then that's fine. The goal of the magician is to transmute gold. The idea is that can also be yourself. So maybe this idea of Trump becoming gold, and then there is a 0 point, so it's green. Ultra 17
is an interesting integer,
yeah,
there.
today is the 17th. That was date of record. So
Oh, it is too interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, and I didn't plan that. It wasn't, and Zach knows that because it wasn't really like that.
Yeah, we kind of just threw it together.
But the 17 is really interesting because in Kabbalah there's a pathway on between the moon and Venus. Venus is a diamond. It doesn't have a color, but yes, in Kabbalah it is assigned colors because a diamond with light passing through can refract all colors. 17 is the light falling onto the diamond and going to the moon. The arrow of Mercury, which is green, like the emerald tablets, you would see a green light. You would see an interaction between copper and quicksilver. I think also there are multiple hermeneutics to get there. It's not just Kabbalah, it's not just Freemasonry, but all of those two primary ideas, let's say, so Freemasonry and Kabbalah primarily, are embedded in all Western, and perhaps not just Western, esotericism. That's why I say it's beneficial for people to even have an understanding of the ideas and the terms and the sort of gestural and conceptual layers, because through them you really can understand all Western esotericism. Maybe not the mechanics of it, not doing rituals and things, but you'll have enough understanding that you'll be able to see past the smoke.
I would say it is like understanding the symbols is like having a map and a compass in a forest.
That's a perfect metaphor. Zach, explain to us Isaac Cappy's interesting and strange interpersonal relations. Before I interrupted you, I apologize.
Okay. So I need to find it because I wrote it on the side. Okay, here it is. It's a little bit down. I'll include it right now, but I'll also bring it back up whenever I get to this point. But I found it odd that I found a photo of Isaac Cappy with David Brock. Yes, David Brock, the ex-boyfriend of James Elefantis, the owner of Comet Ping Pong, that, many a conspiracies circulate around. So that right there makes me kind of take a step back and be like, oh, wait a second here. He has a connection to one of the main villains in his story. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. His name is so prominent in the Q conspiracy, but also in liberal elite DC circles.
Exactly. I mean, he really is a power player in DC. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just you could cast all of the conspiracy and rumor out around him. You will still find GQ articles saying that he's the 48th, 49th most influential person in DC as a pizza shop owner. Okay? So we just need to put that into context and try to understand how a pizza shop owner is one of the most influential characters in DC.
Lay that out for us, Zach.
Okay. So we talked about the plus ultra connections with Trump, or I shouldn't say connections with him, but the implied connections around him.
I think Bannon was probably very influential in at least elements of the Q theory, or the Q, I forgot what you called it, but he used an interest, like the Q scenario. So I think
Yeah.
I think Steve Bannon, it was instrumental.
And
I
Flynn as well.
Flynn's definitely very Masonic. I think Steve is more of a magician, in my personal opinion. I'm not giving a value judgment. It's how I perceive things. And I think that he is a lot more. Flynn is more. There's a way you can be able. You are able to be a Mason and a magician, because those are really the same thing.
Yeah.
That's Flynn, but he does it by rote learning.
Yeah,
Okay?
I would say that Bannon has the media training, whereas Flynn has the symbolism training.
Yeah, you're totally right. Okay, so thank you for clarifying me. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, I knew where you were going with it. Okay, so we covered the Trump connection, or implied connection. Now, what we're going to move to now is where Tracy had also discussed how her work on plus ultra, at least the vernacular plus ultra, the verb, or not, the noun plus ultra, was utilized in another scenario. Okay, so it wasn't just utilized in the Q scenario, but it was also used in a Disney scenario. Okay, so what was going on where they were building on a real LARP, an ARG, artificial reality game, that was used as promotion for a role-playing game that was put out by Disney, that was also being used as another promotion for their Tomorrowland movie. Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3 connections here. It's convoluted, but this is the one. I would say this scenario was set up for the professional managerial class, the PMCs. And the other one would be set up for, like, excuse the communist language, but like the lumpen proletariat, I guess, would be who that would be for.
That is really the division. That's what I think lost a lot of people who were maybe more like me, who were more left. I was never progressive, but I definitely had a more left-wing orientation. So, but what lost me was that all the real people, I'm not talking about, PMCs or academics or white collar people more. I'm talking about regular people. They are not into they are not into the way the radical Dems, whatever you want to call them, they don't think that way. That's very abnormal to them. I think even for me, it helps, like, wake me up and realize, like, a lot of this is bullshit. Because
I mean, that's pretty much where I come to.
I know you said this last time, but Marxism claims to speak for this. It's the voice of the perfected man who is forged through their system. Marxism relies a lot on Malkuth and Mars, Gabura. It's the hammer and the sickle, but it's not the Saturnian sickle. That's a mistake a lot of people make. It's actually the Ceres sickle. It's the one that looks like a crescent moon. It's to cut the wheat at harvest. So yeah, it's a different sickle. So
and I would also say that I've seen the sickle was also used as a symbol in some of the meat cults. I would see, and I think what it was a castration knife. It wasn't a farming sickle. So that's another thing that I'm not sure where to place that, but I've seen it being used in some of these old, like on some, I think it was on like it was on a coffer or something that one of these guys was holding a sickle in one of his hand and like what was in the other hand, like a chain or something. I can't remember. I'd have to go look through the pictures, but I just saw that it was interesting. I was like, oh, that's not, I don't think that's a farming sickle. I think that's a castration knife.
And see, but that's what makes the metaphor so interesting when you
Yeah.
put it on the tree, because that is because we do not live on Malkuth. Malkuth is something we forge around us. Malkuth is not the garden, it's not the farm, it's not the village. It is literally the ground we stand on. So it can be anything we want it to be. You could say that hard work forges the man. That's kind of an axiom of Marxism in a simplistic way. And that's fine. You know, they can have a truism in some way. But there's also this element of you are the wheat to be threshed. Man is the wheat threshed. We are
And to be
simply,
tended to.
exactly. So if you understand it in that way, where there's this eugenicist element, the Soviet Union was highly eugenicist, not any more or less perhaps than other dialectical societies. They did place a lot of emphasis on it, and I think it's okay to say that now. And I think it's a lot of eugenics. They are trying to really separate the people into different categories, very theosophical, the 5 races, the 5 colors, the 5 spiritual qualities, the 5 natures. I definitely think that there is an element of that. The way you're understanding the crescent is the same. It's the continuity of layers.
Yeah. So, and also I would say that like late 1800s, early 1900s was like very much everybody was into eugenics. It wasn't just like certain groups. It was across the world. Everybody was into eugenics. Everybody was talking about how they're going to manage population growth. And obviously it comes up to Club of Rome stuff where they're actually putting this stuff on paper and saying it to the public that we need to control population. And I think that's where when eugenics started to go underground because they saw a public backlash to it.
And then they underwent rebranding and they made it about progressive family planning and how China uses that exact phrase translated into Chinese, interestingly. But it's from the English phrase family planning, but they put it into Chinese, and it's a very interesting construction of language. Anyways, I'm sorry, I won't go on that point. But I do think it's the same thing where they're embedding these eugenicist seeds, these ideas embedded in words and ideas, but the idea is more nebulous than the word itself. It embeds in all these different societies, and then they're seeing how each society is going to interpret it depending on their level of indoctrination.
Yeah, and then they foster the ones that are working well.
That's really good.
Okay, so we're at this role-playing game. Okay, this was an ARG that was okay. She didn't list this in any of her appearances on podcasts or anything. I don't know. She might have written about it, but it was, you know, her. If you've seen her website, a lot of her old work is off of there, so it's very hard to go back and find some of these things. But I found that this ARG that was being utilized to promote this Tomorrowland movie was called The Optimist. That was the title of this. So The Optimist was an alternative reality game from Disney. And if you want, you can go on YouTube. You can find a series of like 10 videos on, where do I have it? I have here it is, found on Inside the Magic on YouTube. It is a verified Disney channel. So it's not like some random person that put this together, but you can go through and there's 10 different videos, and it's an ARG basically explaining that there is a secret society. Okay, hold your breath here. There is a secret society that includes scientists such as Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla, and they were kidnapping some of the most promising minds of the time to bring them into a hidden kingdom in another dimension that was an advanced society separate from all the stupid people dragging them down to preface this, or to preface the game. So this is the same analogy for the PMCs as it was for the Lumpenproletariat. So they're using the same sort of hero worship to get people to fall in line and be, quote unquote, initiated into their system.
Mm-hmm.
And I brought this up the first time because, you know, I was looking for, I think I said it the first time, I was looking for an Aleister Crowley poem, and I couldn't find it. But I did find this other poem called Optimist by Aleister Crowley. Right? So, I mean, come on now. I have to include it. I don't have any reason not to, and it's probably just completely ridiculous and tertiary, but Optimist by Aleister Crowley. Kill off mankind and give the earth a chance. Nature might find in her inheritance the seedlings of a race less infinitely base. Okay, so what is he talking about there? What is Aleister Crowley talking about there? He's talking about culling the population to help the planet.
It even makes sense with the Disney thing. That poem fits perfectly with the Kabbalistic metaphysical story that they laid out.
Exactly.
They're saying the kingdom's a Kabbalistic word. So when people hear the word kingdom, they should immediately think, okay, what are they talking about? The 10th sphere, Malkuth. The kingdom is the place that we forge. It's the thing that is the interaction with man and matter. It's not just the planet Earth. It is literally our interaction with it. They are building this thing in a supposed another dimension, very tantric Buddhist, by the way, and it's a Naga realm, if you want to say that. I know people have mentioned my love of that word, but Nagas live in a subtle world, so it would seem to some people, a way of coding it, whether it's real or not real, it doesn't matter, but it would seem like another dimension in a way, to bring them into these, maybe drawing from our first episode, maybe psychedelic experiences.
There we go.
The snakes, the serpents from DMT, that's very common aside from the machine elves. I don't like the idea of it. I think it's very,
I think it's like a trope that's actually utilized. I'm not even quite sure if what they're saying about a machine elf or what these things are. I think a lot of that is like, oh, this is popular recreation of the society, and then people will see that in whenever, because they're expecting to see it.
Yes, exactly. You totally get it. Okay, so I'm so glad you said this, because I know that that's true. If someone describes a magical experience to someone else, you can put traps by not describing it correctly.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
can put traps, and that's the same thing with tripping, because it is a magical experience. It's not exactly one-to-one, but it's very similar. So the things that people say about your experience are going to color your preconceptions of those experiences. So that's why I don't like using those terms. However, the Naga thing is so universal. There's an Aboriginal Australian aspect to it. There's a South American aspect to it. There's clearly a subcontinental Indian, Pan-Indian, and also Chinese. The Chinese creation story is two Naga as a brother and a sister. Those are the creators of the whole universe. Just a universal thing. I'm comfortable using it because people do tend to see serpent people sometimes.
Yeah, and I would even say like something like the Dagons, like the fish people too. That's another one of these archetypes that's seen all across the world.
It's so interesting that you say that, because I often try and find vintage pictures of the avatars of Vishnu, because Vishnu, in some ways of thinking, is Ahriman. One of his avatars is called Matsya, and he has a fish tail. But I found vintage ones, a huge cache of them, and they don't depict a fish tail; they depict a serpent's tail. So to go along with what you're saying, and the Dagon and these and that's a really cool B horror movie, by the way. Everybody should go watch that. And I've never read the book, so I'm not going to pretend. But there is a similarity, and there's even a similarity in the look, how a fish tail looks. There's the scales, there's the glistening, it's gross. That's very snake-like. And so I think maybe they're referring to something similar, related, or the same thing, but different perceptions of it from different cultures.
I agree. Okay, this Disney scenario. If you're if you're interested to look into, I have to include, if you're interested in looking into how the Plus Ultra was used in the QAnon psyop or scenario, I would suggest you go to burners.me and search for Tracy Time, The Passion of Isaac Cappy. And he goes through, has a lot of good pictures, has some videos that have been removed and stuff. But you can see in here that he points out the Plus Ultra, points out that these scenario. I mean, I shouldn't even say that, but he's pointing to physical facts that are pertinent to the story. So that's where you would look for the QAnon scenario. Now, if you're interested into seeing what the Disney scenario was, I would suggest you check out The Verge did an article. The article was How Disney Imagineering Revealed the Secrets of Tomorrowland 2 years ago. And there's also another article which I just found recently, which I don't know how this one didn't show up, but it is initially it didn't show up, but it was on insidethemagic.com, and this is basically from Disney. The article is The Optimist Concludes with Wild Adventure at 2013 D23 Expo, Disneyland as Disney ramps up Tomorrowland promotion. So you can go through in this article and you could see what I'm talking about and see some of the that I'm going to reference here. So I said that I have in here that the pamphlet for the D23 was peculiar, and Inside the Magic has a very good picture of the pamphlet that you can look right on it. It's not going to be as impactful, I guess, this time, because the first time that we did this, I had asked Jin to pull up this web page, or not this web page. I had him pull up the Verge article and scroll down and just look at the pamphlet and see what he saw in the pamphlet. And my verbal description would be, it looks to be a trophy with a globe imposed on the top of it. Looks to be the same visuals for the COVID virus at the top of the trophy, which when I asked Jin this initially, he said, "Oh, I think you said, yeah, it's sun, and then you said COVID."
Yeah, because it has there's a solar element. There's a clear solar. It's a synthesis.
The Optimist concludes with Wild Adventure at 2013 D23 Expo, because this one actually shows a picture of the trophy at the expo. And if you look in I think it's literally the picture following. I know it's a couple pictures down, but you could see the trophy at the expo, and at the top of the trophy, you see that the sun and moon are halves. So one half of it is a crescent moon, and the other half is this spiked ball that is supposedly symbolizing the sun.
It also looks like a virus, at least whatever they show us about. Yes. I mean, I believe viruses are real. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that there's a promotion of certain.
There's a promotional thing going on here.
Exactly. And then there's an element of what they show us viruses are, like in regular news articles. It's not
right.
It's not you looking under a microscope and perceiving it directly. It's through a third hand source, and they're often colored. And right. I think something just to emphasize is, why are they colored in colors that are not how they appear? And then secondly, what do those colors actually mean? I think that there is a disturbing pattern that emerges when looking at this Disney Imagineering R&D, the Optimist game. They even say designed to blur the lines between history, future, fiction, and fact.
Yes, exactly. And to pin more on this pamphlet. Okay, so we have the spiked ball at the top that, is a sun or a virus. And then if you look on the trophy itself, at the top of the trophy, there is a band of numbers that goes across the top. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, and the numbers are 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. And these are in a cream color or a white color. And 22, 23 is in a black color. And there's a little ball that denotes that there's something that changes right between 20 and 21. And we all know that you can imply something changed between 20 and 21. Now you also, this is more harebrained thought, but also I would point out that the date that this expo was held was August 9th or August 11th. So the date at the top of the pamphlet is 9/11. That's just, curious. We've talked about there's magical annotations to that, but I felt that it needed to be pointed out because it's there. It's an interesting thing to look at.
I definitely think August 9 through 11th, 9 times 11, 99, Masonic 99. And then you have D23 and 23 Dath, knowledge. 23, 5, Dath is the fifth sphere. It's the sphere that is secretly happens. So if gold appears at the sun, what appears at Dath is true knowledge, is something that cannot be quantified or understood even, or maybe even articulated to someone who hasn't had that high of a magical experience, because there are different grades, right?
Yeah.
I think this is just unbelievable. And I did not do that on purpose. I did not number the episode 20 and 21 on purpose. Okay, so I will say that. But I did. I don't know. Maybe it was subconscious.
That is funny though. I just thought of that. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So, and I need to think about this a little bit, because what I have here is, because now that I'm looking back on this, I think 4chan was the secondary. So I think the Disney ARG is what occurred first, because I think this was 2013 that this ARG was used. And 4chan, or whatever chan it was, must have found this ARG, and they took this and ran with it, claiming that Donald Trump was a part of it. And he had come from the future as some plot to save the world. I have some QAnon plot to save the world. This was at the same time Tracy was setting up her website with Alexander Rivera, her co-author on Baphomet, which coincidentally was named Plus Ultra Syndicate website, pulling the Plus Ultra concepts into the QAnon LARP. So this is another thing where I'm not sure if, Tracy was, how would you phrase that? Or if this was signed off on by her to utilize her intellectual property, or if they just took her intellectual property and used it for their own scenario. That's where some people would probably have some discrepancies where they'd be like, no, she was involved. No, she wasn't. And to be frank, I don't have information to decide either way. But I will say that when Tracy talked about both of these scenarios using Plus Ultra, she sounded and visually appeared as if it was irritating but flattering, I think is the way I'd phrase that. So then we move from this, and you jump to Cappy's death. And before he died, he put out an hour or so long live stream. I think it was on, what was the Periscope app, claiming that he did something wrong. He betrayed everyone and compares himself to Judas Iscariot, which he says has put other people in danger. He himself is in danger, and bad things are coming my way, quote. Constantly telling his chat that he wasn't suicidal, that he had recently become convinced that he was Judas Iscariot. That was a quotation from Isaac. And I have in here that it sounds like that he was manipulated or brainwashed, or this was part of the LARP where he's playing a manipulated, brainwashed person to convince people that this is what's going on. And I'm not sure any of the above.
You're really good about this, that you don't really take a firm position, and neither do I. And I try and be flexible with my opinions either way and not be dialectical, as we said in the beginning. But I do think it's interesting as a thought experiment to think of him as the latter, as an actor playing someone who is manipulated or brainwashed, or what we know in popular conspiracy as MK Ultra. I think that that's an interesting position to take. It doesn't mean it's true. It just I'm just saying from my perspective, I think it makes sense. I think you can make an argument for that, but I also think that it gives his actions more motivation.
Yeah. I would say, yeah, there we go. There we go. I would see that too, because, at the time, this was a very big social experience, I guess, that was going on around this, because there was a lot of people talking about this stuff. It was kind of almost kind of getting mainstreamed in a weird way, where it was populating in certain circles, and people were referencing it that were mainstream individuals, but they wouldn't actually talk about what was going on in the story. They would just reference little different details from it. So it made me think, oh, maybe this is one of those things that's like too hot to touch, or maybe they're saying, or they're implying that this is too hot to touch just so nobody looks at it.
That's the question. And Kabbalah also used to be spelled with a Q. Where did they go? Because this exists. The Q, everybody now understands what Q is to some degree. To some degree.
Yeah.
I don't even people who are more libtard, whatever, they understand it, but they have a negative perception. I think it's a very negative. Oh, you're low IQ, or it's working class coded. But I also think that there is, because this is a rabbit hole that very normal people got into conspiracy because of it.
Yeah.
Heard from like other people recount their experiences, how they got deep in, and then they out the other end.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that this is, and it's also, it kind of dovetails with one of the big conspiracies at like 2019 of Jeffrey Epstein, where this is a very high profile trafficking cult that I shouldn't say cult, this is a very high profile sexual trafficking / blackmailing individual that was also involved with very, very high end financial crimes. So this is also a way to kind of dilute the conversation revolving around him and have it focused more on superficial things.
That's a really great point, Zach. I'm so glad you said that, because this is what always frustrated me about that. About even the writing that I respect on it, and there are people who have discussed it at length in a way, in some ways at least, describing facets of it.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that a lot of what was really happening is completely obfuscated. I'm not saying that people haven't discussed those facts, but I do think the emphasis is placed on the superficial layers, the exterior, what is perceived. It doesn't necessarily even mean it's true. I'm not saying he wasn't running a sex cult or whatever. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that by the time that culminated in him going to jail, that was something that people did in the early 2000s and 90s. He had passed his heyday, so he was an easy sheep to throw sort of to the
I could see that too.
Because it's not even that deep. There's clearly a very sinister element with like Eastern Europe, and I know Whitney Webb's discussed things in Hong Kong and with Filipino girls and maids to rich Saudi princes. It's extremely nefarious, but I do think that it's the iceberg. It's the iceberg meme.
Yeah, it literally is the iceberg meme.
His name he's not even the deep name. He's the name that they wanted us to know. In my opinion.
Yeah, there we go. I would agree with that too. And it's almost like his operation, his scenario had ran its course, so you can discard and move on to the next one.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Which could have been what's the young fella's name from FTX?
Oh, Sam Bankman-Fried.
Which could have been lined up for the next one, because he was. But this is all me kind of just thinking about this aloud. I have no factual basis for that. It's just certain connections with effective altruism and other things like that I'm like, there could have been something there.
No, you're right. You're smart to touch on this. Like this is very very prescient point you're making. it's not wrong that you're making a speculation. I think this is something that is rooted in material reality. I don't think it's far-fetched or making a connection that isn't there. I think it's very much, it's like what we said in the last episode, and I think you agreed.
Yeah, it's just I just have to couch my opinions that, you
100%.
know, this is alleged, you know. I can't say for certain that any of this, or not any of this, but you know, for certain of these accusations, they're heavy accusations, they have to be alleged because I don't have any proof for it and they haven't been convicted. So just got to put that out there. And so then we're talking about Isaac Cappy and his final video. He dies, and several days later, I think, or I have a few days later, Ashley Massaro, Massaro. She was a Smallville actress who committed suicide a few days after. And I would say think Nexium. So how we're talking about how like there's certain sex cults that were, you know, very high profile. Nexium is probably the best example to go to. And I just think that the timing is very, very interesting, especially because, you know, I'm pretty sure that she weren't they played in a show together or something. I can't remember, but they knew each other. I'll just say that. But what I will say about this last video that Isaac made, which, like we were saying, this could just be showing his great acting chops. But when I initially saw this, I saw this as a completely different demeanor than he usually was. He was normally very happy, carefree, even when he's talking about subjects like Pizzagate and stuff. Which, you know, if you're interested in something like that, I'd say look into the videos that Mouthy Buddha had done on it, and I think Memory Hold has done a video with Mouthy Buddha on it, just to see the visual representation and the visual facts before you start to kind of like place these facts into a greater board, because there was certainly things that were going on there that were fishy, but you know, this is circumstantial evidence. You know, we can only assert that this is weird. Yeah, I sound like a Democrat. Yo, this is weird, man.
Do not let them take that word. They're not allowed. That's a cool.
No, dude. Weird stuff is cool, and I'm not gonna let it be taken. So Isaac was found dead under an underpass on Transwestern Road outside of Flagstaff, Arizona, apparently after jumping off and being ran over by a man in a small pickup truck. This is a scenario, or not scenario, this is circumstantial, but Tom Hanks also posted a strange photo on Instagram of a lost glove on Route 66 with the caption roadkill ... on Route 66, just a few days, I think it was a few days after that he had passed, something like that, which people saw this, and I'm pretty sure, I think when we talked about this the first time, it was, I think, Sean Alger or it was Mouthy Buddha, one of the two, found in this photo of that Tom Hanks posted on his Instagram, there was a small bottle cap with a P on it, a small red bottle cap with a P on it around the shadow of his elbow, which Cappy, I mean, it's this is getting to the point where it's like, it's so on the nose that like that is very, it's so extremely curious that I can't, it puts it into the two into that dialectic of this is a LARP that they planned this, or this is real and he is really bragging about this. And I'm just like, what could it be? Or was it really just a random bottle cap on the ground there? This could all be, you know, crazy nonsense, but I just like, that's strange. And this is also where I had pointed out that I found it odd that I found a photo of Cappy with David Brock. So this is where I was like, that's interesting. And I think we talked about this a little bit in the first one, where Kappa, this is what Tracy was talking about in one of her videos about this, that Kappa is a Japanese water reptoid.
Hmm.
And I think you talked about it for a moment, and there was also I had brought up that she had mentioned there were Geas or Geas, Geas, a magical vow or obligation or injunction placed on someone to do something or not to do something, which typically brings harm if violated and blessings if obeyed. And I think this is a story that was used often women place geas on men, and the Chuchulan or Chuchulain. I think this is a story of placing one of these geas on a person, then placing another gia on that person, which the first one would be no eating dog meat, and then the second one is must eat anything coming from a woman. And so an old hag offers him dog meat and he cannot refuse, so he dies. So this is like a contradicting of two obligations or injunctions placed upon an individual. So like it's a catch 22, I guess, kind of would be a good way to phrase it. It's like it's bad either way.
I want to jump in really quick, Zach.
Yes, I expected you to.
So kappa, yes, it's a naga. It's basically a naga. I know some people don't like my overbroad use of the Sanskrit categories because I know the Sanskrit categories are not localized. But I think in a broad way, naga is just a reptile person who kind of exists in that subtle realm that I mentioned. So I agree. There's something there. K obviously is the 11th letter of the English alphabet. Crowley was extremely fond of it. Kappa in Greek for people who understand the fraternity system. There's a whole gematria for Greek. And then about what you're saying, this is a really interesting idea. So dog meat is one of the 5 forbidden meats in Tantric Buddhism. Now, I'm saying that it's a forbidden meat. We do not eat dogs, but there is an idea, a conceptual idea of the dog representing something else. So in your mind, you might create a nectar. And this ties into the next part about being able to refuse nothing that comes from a woman. That can also have a metaphysical layer. This is a very tantric idea, something I think Tracy was maybe talking about, or the story was some perennial idea that starfire. So this Kenneth Grant he popularized that term as menstrual fluid, obviously, and blood, or menstrual blood, and mixing it together with the transgressive meat that creates nectar. Okay, so when you hear someone who's a tantric Buddhist discuss nectar, that's what they're talking about. But it's a conceptual idea. Okay, it's not real. It's just a conceptual idea because all the things have multiple layers of meaning. But if you are approaching some of these transgressive texts from the first path, you're told noob, and you're looking at it. You don't have a guru or anything. You're just looking at it. And you're hearing this, of course, you're going to think, oh, this is what I have to do, right? Because people get very transgressive, and transgressivity often feels pleasurable, and people get very caught up in pleasure. That's sometimes what happens to a lot of magicians. I think that's really interesting. And then to just jump in about the Gaius, and this will be my last point, is that this, although we don't have necessarily the exactly same metaphysical idea, it is interesting that there are certain oaths and vows that you cannot break, and if you do break them, you have to undergo rites of rectification.
No, because I remember the first time that I brought up the Gias and the Kappas is you went on, you were talking about, I think you brought up another, whatever, it's not the point, but yes, I wanted you to speak on this because this is where I'm like, I'm at a lack of knowledge on this. I need to look to, this kind of sound a little stupid, but I need to look towards an expert to at least point out some more details that can be followed here, because I'm left just asking more questions.
Well, let me also point out, thank you for saying that, Zach, but I'm not an expert, but I'll take it. The devil card. This sort of idea is very much conceptualized by the devil card in tarot. It is a male and a female with the Baphomet figure, as discussed in the first episode of this series, and they are held by collars around their neck. Now, there is a slight iconographic deviation in the earlier decks where the female's chain is actually a chain of flowers, meaning that she can more easily resist or pull away the impulse from sin. Or we'll just describe it as that, as sin. she doesn't want to necessarily. Whereas the man is much more driven. He's much more chained. His chain is iron. It's his desire for material things is imbued in who he is. But he can do it because his hands are free, right? The collar it's just a conceptual collar. If he liberates himself, then he's no longer chained. But pleasure is very addictive. So, and
Yeah.
that's why the female doesn't leave either, because she knows it's a game, but she's into the game.
Go back to the chains, the chains of flowers you were saying. Explain that one more time.
When the chains are around her neck, it's not really a chain. Her collar is attached by a daisy chain. How in Victorian England they would have made this. If you've ever seen a Jane Austen movie, the kids always play, like, they make the posies for their hair.
Yeah.
It's a flower wreath or a garland. So it can easily be pulled away, right? Because it's just flowers. But
I see.
but she likes it. She thinks it's pretty. These are conceptual. This is not about gender. This really isn't about gender.
Yeah.
This is just a conceptual way to describe it. She sees the flowers. She thinks they're pretty. That's how they trap her in the game. The man,
okay.
He wants meats. He wants sex. He wants money. He wants all of those things. Where she's more interested in beauty and phenomena around her. She's ADD. And the man is autistic. He's more focused on the singular thing in front of him.
Yeah. Okay. Well, what when you said that she was chained, it made me think of the coffer lid that Tracy had in the Baphomet book, and on the coffer lid, it's a depiction of Meat holding two chains on the right and left, and they are supposedly holding the sun and the moon. They're chaining the sun and the moon to the earth. And if you look on the coffer, the sun and the moon's faces are upside down. And I think that symbolizes something. I'm not quite sure what it symbolizes. But when you were talking about like that she was chained down, it made me think of this thing of Cybele chaining down the heavens and holding the heavens to earth.
I think this is the right line of thinking. I think this is the right trajectory. That it is word alchemy, but there's also something else tied into that, deep mythological layer. And I think that makes sense, is that she's bringing in. So if you're saying it's Cybele, I'll just use that. Usually I would say, one of my tantric goddesses, but we'll say Cybele. She's holding down the chains. She's beneath Malkuth. She upholds what we stand on, the earth. And so she has to hold them there in order to maintain what is for her at that moment very pleasurable. So she's kind of a Lilith character in the story, and she holds them there, like the illusory light, which is the sun, and then the moon, which is more of a delusional light, but it can also be that of true knowledge. So she has to hold them there so people can ascend the tree, because this is always the metaphor, is always about the tree, ascending the tree. And she holds them there so people are able to do it. But because she's in pleasure, you can also ask her for anything and she will give it. That's the idea, is that she will bestow boons upon devotees who give her things she likes when she's in this state of consciousness under the earth.
Yeah, and also I'd point out that there is Arabic writing on this coffer lid. There is a skull head directly below her feet. There is a 5-pointed star drawn with one line to under her left foot, and then there is a 7-pointed star that kind of looks like a snowflake under her right foot. So that's just to build the image in your head of what this coffer is looking like. The Arabic writing's all around the sides of it, or on the edges of it, excuse me.
Zach, what does her face look like, if you can remember?
I'm looking at it right now, and her face is kind of distorted. It looks like it was kind of maybe chipped away. Her eyes are really big and bulbous. She has a coif on her head with 3 towers jutting out of the top of it. She's wearing a cloak. She is slightly obese and is completely naked.
Yeah, so I think that my understanding of it is actually a good one in this instance, at least, because to me, at least from what you're describing and being somewhat good at iconography as I am, this is a Chamunda figure. This is the Lilith figure. It's what we would call Ekajati in Buddhism, although Ekajati and Chamunda are the same. They're not. We tend to delineate these kinds of consciousness in different stages. So if I say she's Chamunda, but then I also say she's the primordial consort, they're the same, but they're distinct. There's a distinction.
They're different states.
Yes, exactly.
I would even say it's like think of like states of matter, like gas, liquid, solid.
That's interesting that you say that, and I'm sure you do know this, is that the five-pointed star can refer to transitional states between matter. So the five normative elements, I think we even spoke about this on the original. There's the fire, earth, air. Air is the combination of three elements, fire, earth, and water. And then you have void, akasha, sometimes consciousness, sometimes it's sound. Those can all be also described in different ways, but I think in to refer back to this goddess figure, what I'm going to call Chamunda, she is the one who speaks the primordial words of destruction, but they can also be words of creation. So what this means is they are the primordial magical words. Basically, they are the primordial seed syllables, and she does not, in Buddhism, she's been blinded. But if you look at Indian iconography, she has both eyes, all three eyes still, because she has three eyes open. Why she's blinded is because she speaks the sound without view, meaning she does not get caught up in her own pleasure of Maya, of the thing that she is. She must perceive with only her third eye that which is truly real. So that which is beyond illusory light, that which is beyond illusory light. But she's also those things, so that's why she's blind. There's quite a deep meaning, actually. And I will just point out that the Kabbalah for episode 20, which was your episode, Zach, is a very difficult number because it means the spiritual blindness. I didn't realize this until after I gave it to you. But I actually think it made a lot of sense looking back. Like maybe it was just all aligning. And it makes a lot of sense considering the subject matter that you did.
Yeah, because it is almost like there's like a spiritual blinding, like parodied with a false unveiling.
Yes, well said.
Yeah, so well, the next part, right now I've gotten to the next part, which is talking about Tracy's death, which we'll probably talk about in another one. But just to summarize, this is what I discovered on this, which is why I felt the need to share this, that I stumbled on this Disney ARG that was utilized to support a group known as Plus Ultra. Then this same ARG was found by 4chan, or I should rephrase this at the beginning. This Disney ARG was used on the PMC class, and then the 4chaners discovered this and then started utilizing it in their own ARG for the more right-wing individuals. But the point of this is they were both pointing to the same group that was going to save them, Plus Ultra, the Plus Ultra group. And that's where I come to, I don't know if Tracy was involved with this, if she signed off on having them use her IP, or if they just stole her stuff and ran with it. It could be any of these things, but I think that it's very important that we at least recognize that these esoteric ideas and thought patterns are being utilized in political manners.
I think this is a very cogent point, and I think this is the overarching theme of this episode in particular, is that there clearly are. So if I'm going to give it a not maybe as a parapolitical layer, but more a metaphysical layer, maybe the seed is the same. So they're talking Plus Ultra, as I said, 0 point. There's a singular point of entry as well as a singular point of exit, but it's all one thing. But really it's nothing. That's very interesting metaphysically also, because 0 is a later addition to the alphabet, or not the alphabet, excuse me, to numbers.
Arabic numbers.
To Arabic numerals. Yes, exactly. You got it, Zach.
Yes.
So from my perspective, I think if you were a Michael Aquino, and he's way overused by con leftists as the boogeyman. And don't get me wrong, he's a boogeyman.
He's a pretty big boogeyman.
He's a big boogeyman without qualifier. Okay, but I do think that we only know names and people of people who they want us to know.
Right, of those that have been cast away.
Exactly. You got it. So a seed can be planted by anyone, and then what happens is that any group can really take it and run with it. So I think there's an interesting idea of you're saying, yeah, maybe Tracy did. Maybe Tracy knew that she was with people who have, well, we know from Dana's work that there were people with intelligence backgrounds in the Temple of Psychic Youth. So I mean, I don't know if she was aware, but I think that even if you're aware, maybe it's okay, whatever. That's how I would think. Maybe okay, whatever. But you're doing interesting things. You're doing these kind of dialectical, alchemical, magical experiments. Ritual, obviously magic, but also the other kinds of magic. You're doing this with a group that's very exciting. It's transgressive. It's, you're recreating something, and you're doing this other research on the Templars and the origin of this kind of magic, but you're doing it for yourself or your group. So I think there's a way that you can say you got caught up in it. You didn't really consider the consequences. You didn't really perceive the other players on the board. Maybe you didn't even know you were playing. Maybe you were just playing with the chessboard in front of you, which is magic. So magic's just one of many battlegrounds, right? It's not the overarching board. That's what people, I think, sometimes get mistaken about, is that they think that magic is the system, but magic's just a tool of the system. It's not necessarily
Yeah.
right. It's just one way. So I think that's how I would have approached it in my 20s as well. If someone was like, come into this group, it's left-hand path, it's transgressive, we're doing this and this, and if it wasn't too crazy, I'd probably be like, sure. And then you're doing things, and if you're smart enough, and Tracy's very high IQ, I'm relatively high IQ, and so yeah, I would get caught up in doing things and maybe thinking of things in this Aristotelian dialectical way. And again, it corresponds to the 4 quadrants, right? That was the original Aristotelian dialectic: space, time, light, and dark. So it really comes back to that processiology of looking at, they're clearly different groups. When I'm looking at the Disney material that you sent me, my mind is very satanic in some ways. Why? Because PMCs tend to worship, not all of them, I'm not calling everyone satanic. I'm saying a lot of PMCs worship themselves. Like they don't have that. There's no externality. They don't have that.
They're the end all be all.
Exactly. That's all it is. So that's when I'm calling it satanic. That's what I mean. It's just people who really worship themselves. Whereas QAnon is much more Luciferian, because you are seeking a sort of end point or 0 point of the truth, because with every truth comes a new hypothesis, right? Like there's never an ending conclusion.
And kind of a new paradigm as well.
Exactly. That is very Luciferian. So you can even see there's different, what is going to attract someone to one psyop is going to be different and play to those lower desires. There's lower conceptual thinking. There's something that's more secular, or more, if you don't have a strong faith identity, and I don't think faith is this great shield that sometimes people make it out to be, but I do think it gives you an ideological barrier against some of this, because if you're really deep in your theology, you're not going to be so swayed by these secular theologies.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's a general rule. Is that?
Yeah, I would say that faith is one of the reagents for a whole person. Oh, I just wanted to say from the last one where I said that I thought that Romans were mostly like a Mithraic cult. I should include that at the time, Sol Invictus was kind of syncretized with Mithras. So the Sol Invictus cults could kind of graft themselves onto a Mithras cult, which both of them could kind of graft themselves on the Christian theology.
I think that's a great point, because again, that goes more to the Luciferic quadrant, specifically how a lot of Processians will say Christ, and never Jesus, but they will say Christ. And that is exactly what you're saying. It's the Sol Invictus character married to Mithras. And that makes perfect sense. And I actually think that was a continuity from original Iranian Zoroastrianism, but perhaps was lost in some Peloponnesian War. Maybe that knowledge, that kind of ritual way of thinking or theology was things go to sleep, so that thinking went to sleep, and then they sort of reintegrated it after some time. So I agree with you. I think that's a really great point to end on. Thank you so much, Zach, for being such a, I called you my Naga, so I'll just say that. I do appreciate you a lot, and honestly been an amazing person to work with, amazing person to get to know. And I know Zach from Clock Shavings, when I did that book with him. I know he's really swap cast with you, so we'll set it up and we'll make it happen. And I'm really excited, and I thank you so much for being part of the series. And tell everyone your Twitter, even though I know you're a little more quiet on the posting side. I know that you are on, because I can see that you like my posts, and so I think people should follow you. I think you're very insightful, and you're a great dude, so everybody follow Zach.
Zachary Shumar on X, Twitter, the everything app. Oh wait, there was one more thing. Oh, on the first episode I had said that Baphomet may have came from Muhammad or Muhammad, and what I think actually is both Baphomet and Maphomet both came from Met. So that's where I might have confused the way I said it in the first one. I don't think that Baphomet came from Muhammad. No, I think they both are stemming from the same god.
I actually had one thing that I should have added that I thought of after listening, was that there is the Greek goddess Métis. There are Métis people in Canada, and their flag is an infinity symbol with a blue background. So it is, again, it's very Masonic. And so I do think that is interesting. And they are a people forged in synthesis, because they are literally half French. Well, no, they're not half necessarily, but they're a multi-generational mixed race community of Indigenous and mostly French Canadian, but some Scottish as well, and mostly Cree. But there's other groups that are supposedly Métis. I forget which ones, but it's mostly Cree and Ojibwe. But I do think that there's this interesting idea, speaking back to the Mithraic cult, is that a lot of all of the people who signed treaties, so that what we would call the treaty chiefs, they were all Métis. They were all mixed race people, and they all had blue eyes, interestingly enough. You can check out our first episode. Have a good one.
Thank you for having me.
Vegeta, thanks.
For what? I should be thanking you, Kakarot.
Nah, what do you mean? I loved every minute. Goodbye, my friend.